Hi there, Sabri here, Sabria. I had an idea here to kind of put together a new series of videos, if you will. This is not that kind of consistent channel, unfortunately, yet. I just started a new position, a new job. I'm very grateful for. So it's taking up a little bit more of my time. I'm catching up on things, but nevertheless, stuff still comes to my head, things that will be helpful, things that have been helpful for me that I would like to see if it's of value to others. So it's kind of like a Know Thyself series. It's spelled Gno. Gno, and it's not a typo. So many of you that are super metaphysical out here um, that I've communicated with will understand gnosis, the word gnosis, Gnosis, which means, I'm referring to my notes here, I got notes this time. So hopefully it's helpful in staying on track, even though I'm already sidetracked. Um, Gnosis is knowledge of spiritual mysteries. So this is understanding the deepest depths of thyself. So know thyself with a G. It's very important, very critical, very specific. In a role where we're all talking about self-development and self-awareness and emotional intelligence, the EQ, we're learning about that in workplaces. And IQ tests and all that has been going on for years. Everybody um, implies that they understand the self, but we kind of cut it off prematurely at the seen version of the self. So I put down some notes too about basically what psychology is, which very into psychology. Psychology is a scientific study of how people behave, think, and feel, versus philosophy, which is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. So one is kind of they're kind of two hands, that are also both valuable. One is like the origins of it. And basically metaphysics, to take it a step further, in philosophy, it's a branch of philosophy that deals with those first principles of things, which are those abstract concepts, being, knowing, cause, identity, all those things. And if you hear this, you're going to fall into one of two groups, more or less. One is going to be intrigued by that concept. One is going to be instantly turned off by that concept. And I think that fact, that dichotomy there is where a lot of the research kind of stops at, it halts at, is understanding that it's not just arbitrary why people have certain proclivities or um, tendencies towards understanding or engaging or liking certain things, behaving a certain way. Psychology, again, we study the behavior, the way people think and the way they feel. And these are all kind of the actions or the effect of what's underlying all of that, which is basically your buildup. And it's not just DNA and genetics and all that stuff. It's going to be based on your birth chart. I know people don't want to hear it, but astrology. I was looking at a thing today that was like trying to trace back that quote from J.P. Morgan. It's attributed to J.P. Morgan that millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And looking into that just really quickly already, it was discredited, not discredited, but said that it was probably his astrologer that said that, because he didn't really discuss it outright openly in his lifetime, but he did have an astrologer that he worked with and that he subscribed to her annual reports and had her very close to his circle, so much that he invited her on a trip to Egypt where he was going to do studies into the occult and finding out how much of the ancient Orient teachings and things that he could find. So he did look into these things. And so the fact that that quote is derived from someone that is so successful, it doesn't mean that we only look into astrology because it's a sin and a greed-induced thing and we're all after the wealth of J.P. Morgan and that level. What it is, it's about understanding yourself and how that can unlock certain things for you in a way that other people might not be privy to, because we were told and conditioned to feel that this study specifically is, first of all, a pseudoscience. That's one of the first like Wikipedia definitions that come up when you look up astrology. It says that it's a pseudoscience. And so I look up what a pseudoscience is even, and it says it's basically a collection of beliefs or practices mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method. Again, it's like it consists of statements, beliefs, or practices that claim to be both scientific and factual, but are incompatible with the scientific method. So if astrology is a pseudoscience, it's incompatible with the scientific method. Well, what is the scientific method? 7 questions. Or 7 steps. You ask a question, you perform research, you establish a hypothesis. Yes, I'm cheating. It's been a long time since I was in school and did my little science fair. Forgive me. You test your hypothesis by conducting an experiment. You make an observation. You analyze the results. You draw a conclusion. And lastly, you present those findings. I don't think it's that hard for astrology to fulfill that scientific method. Therefore, I don't think that it's a pseudoscience. Therefore, I think that it's still being skewed in that delivery of kind of discrediting something that can be so valuable to us, because when you break down the word psychology, even, you have the psyche. The psyche begins that word, and the psyche is it's what we are. It's basically the soul, the mind, body, and soul that makes up human beings. It's the unseen. It's the essence, the life force within all of us. And so if we study how that essence creates our behaviors, thoughts, and actions in day-to-day life, but then we discredit the unseen realm that kind of dictates or is the raw blueprint for why we think and feel and act the way that we do, we're kind of really doing ourselves a disservice. And then when we take that into that frame of thinking, okay, well, maybe the very uber successful people of the world who entertain and explore this information and kind of keep it taped off in secret and kind of base it on, no disrespect to the biblical religions that say astrology, you don't study astrology, but you can also very much look into very quickly this and see that astrology is very much so in the Bible. When you look at the sun, he is risen and he falls. This is like basic stuff. The Zeitgeist is a great documentary, kind of touch on some of that. That's neither here nor there. My thought was, okay, well, what does psychology tell us? Psychology tells us personality types. I've taken personality tests, the Myers-Briggs is it MBTI? Myers-Briggs type indicator instrument, something like that. It gives you those 4-letter combinations. I usually get either an INFJ or an INFP. When I take that test, I realize that I oscillate between those two, but lately it's been more INFJ. These are supposed to be some of the most extremely rare personality types. And you're like, why is that though? What's deeper than that? I have it up here, the information, decisions, structure. Let me go back. The INFJ personality types. The I stands for your favorite world. Do you prefer to focus on the outer world or on your own inner world? This is called extroversion or introversion. Again, the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator was based on the work of Carl Jung and the work that he did to determine a theory of what basically the psychology types that dictate people's lives, and to show that it's not a random variation of behavior, but there's an orderly, consistent way that people can be categorized. And this test helps you determine your proclivities. And again, so you're either extroverted or introverted. And this doesn't mean in the typical, I talk a lot and I don't talk a lot kind of thing. It's a little deeper. It's do you prefer to focus on the outer world or your own inner world? An introverted person, which I have the I type, it means that you're very much so analyzing every situation with how does it affect me? How am I being seen? How are my actions going to affect this person? You're still thinking about your inner world and how does everything revolve around the I. I'm very aware of the self, where the extroverted type could be more so thinking about, oh, what does this mean for you? How do you think? What do you think? It's just, well, I can't speak to that very much because I'm not that type. People could definitely share more, but the point is that it's useful, it's helpful. Moving on, the information question. Do you prefer to focus on the basic information you take in, or do you prefer to interpret and add meaning? This is called the sensing, the S, or the intuition, in. So I have the in there, the intuitive trait, where I prefer to interpret and add meaning to things that I understand. I just don't take it at face value. Decisions. When making decisions, do you prefer to first look at logic and consistency, or first look at people and special circumstances? This is called thinking or feeling. So this is the T or the F in those four-letter indicators. This is where, yeah, I have the F for feeling. You look at the different people in special circumstances where other people, the lens in which they see the world is just different. And as the whole point of doing this and thinking up this little mini series of knowing yourself is so that we can better understand our triggers, what triggers us, what stops, what holds us back in connecting with other people, what common themes of cycles of events in our lives that happen that we don't necessarily want to continue to have. It's because we're not learning the lessons of self. Life is about learning lessons. The lessons pertain to the self because the I is the whole thing until we become we, unity consciousness, integrated and aware, awake, awakened, conscious beings. So until then, we're kind of working on as going about as automatons, basically not in our body. Soul hasn't descended into the self to fill up your being and animate your body and live your purpose because you're kind of just not sure of who you are. And we act like knowledge of self is so hard. It's so difficult to understand who you are and what you want to be in life, but it's all basically written. It's all in the birth chart, your blueprint. And then you build off of that, to determine what you need to tweak to get in the right seat for where you're supposed to be through those lessons. But if we're completely calling it a pseudoscience and just discrediting it, then, which group are you going to be? Millionaires, billionaires, but there's a group of people that we might know that aren't even millionaires. So that means everybody else is just basically walking blind, but there's tools that can help you to move past and move farther in life and kind of elevate your progress. So I think we're just a little bit behind the times. We haven't updated our Wikipedia in life to understand who we are. It's actually not so hard. There's ancient teachings in place. Astrology, the stars, the study of these movements of these bodies is available to us. And so the personality types, like I said, with the INFJ or whatever, there's even similarities. Slow it down. There's similarities within that. So you can look in that, take the test at 16personalities.com for free. And you'll see after you take the test, if you're an INFJ like me, then it'll say who common INFJ people, known INFJ people are. Again, it's supposed to be it's the rarest personality type, but Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and I look at that, oh, Mother Teresa. Just the other day when I was studying the midheaven symbol, that midheaven placement in astrology, I learned that I have the midheaven in Libra. Mother Teresa also had the midheaven in Libra. So it goes deeper. You see, it's not just, oh, I'm this INFJ or INFP or whatever that is. That's just a way that psychology has built a tool to understand this framework. But underneath that, deeper still, is the birth chart, the placements, the placement of the sky, the blueprint, the snapshot of the sky when you were born, to see what energies were beaming down on the earth when you shot through and manifested out of nowhere through the womb of your mother. Okay, we all came from there. There's stuff you don't understand. You don't know how that process came to be. You came from nowhere and you came into that life form. There's just more to it, is basically the point. And we can figure that out. So that's cool. So again, you could take that personality test at 16personalities.com. Moving forward, just basically understanding too, the INFJ personality type, things about that person is you are naturally idealistic. You're a person that has perfectionism built into you, which makes you very critical of yourself. You're also very prone to just wanting to be honest and truthful with people, and peaceful. You want peace. You're not very combative. You're often going to, and the INFP, which I oscillate between that one, is more like this passive. Everybody, let's kind of see what other people's points of view are. The advocate is the INFP type and the archetype in that 16 personalities website. And then for the INFP, the mediator is the archetype. And I can see myself definitely oscillating between those two. And when does that happen? That doesn't mean I'm set as an INFJ then, because when I consciously control my emotions, the INFP personality type is known for absorbing other people's emotions and really hearing them out and getting swept up into their story. Once I became more conscious of the fact that we direct and dictate much of our own story by choosing to be asleep to who we are and our tendencies and our good and our bad, quote unquote, nothing's bad, it's just a lesson. But those of us who choose not to work on the things that we can work on within ourselves to become better, to look at our own stuff and understand, okay, I'm flawed in this, how can I get better? There's some people that don't look at that at all. That's called the unawakened versus the awakened. It's a process, it's a journey. But once I learned that I was becoming a sponge and in some ways a pushover, because that Libra midheaven placement, which I was learning about, which Mother Teresa had, it comes from the opposite of Aries. Aries is fire energy, passion, and it's actually that leader energy. It means that when you have that opposite your MC placement, midheaven, it means when you were growing up in your private life and home life, you actually had to go it alone. You actually had to go through some pretty tough things that made you very independent, that made you very solid. You have this passion burning within you and you want things to be different. You want things to change in the world. So when you have your midheaven where your arrow is pointing in life to how you project in the external world, opposite that Aries placement is going to be always Libra. So where I and Mother Teresa share that placement in Libra, you actually project yourself to the world as being this very peace-loving, accommodating energy, a very Libra is ruled by Venus, as is Taurus, which is my sun sign. It's very feminine. It's very aesthetic, into details and art and things like that, creativity. And again, it's very liberal. Libra is about balance. You want to do the right thing. The INFJ and the INFP placements, that idealism, that wanting to be an advocate for truth and for honesty and for authenticity, makes you very vulnerable and susceptible to when people criticize you, to when people judge you, to when people wrongly label you as a pushover. The Libra can be seen as a pushover because they don't like to make decisions. They don't like to rattle the cage. But what people don't understand is that your public persona, and you did still come from that Aries, that fire is still in you. So then it kind of can come out in your public persona if you don't have that balance. Because people wrongly assume, based on what they see in the outer packaging, that they know the full picture of a person. Just like where astrology is a pseudoscience in the sense that you can't read your little horoscope that comes in a clipping in the newspaper and say, oh, I understand myself. You understand that there's a whole wheel, a birth chart, a wheel. And it's a common phrase that they say, don't reinvent the wheel. But it didn't start with the wheel that created the car, that created all this ability for us to be mobile and get around so much better in life. It started probably with the wheel, the astrological wheel, the zodiac, where again, I always talk about how you become the monad, you embody all of those positive traits of that zodiac. You have to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of yourself, better understand the strengths and weaknesses of others. Like I was saying in the beginning, you learn about your triggers, sensitivity to being criticized, because you are so hard on yourself and that perfectionist nature that you have. If you have Capricorn in your chart, you're constantly climbing and striving. You don't give yourself time to stop and look at your victories because you're constantly set for the next thing. And a lot of times in Virgo placements, you're very tough on yourself. A lot of the earth sign placements are very much so. But because of that, and that's why I'm saying that it goes deeper than the personality tests, and you look at the astrology, you're going to find that these traits, it goes deeper. We should value and honor the unseen, the psyche, just as much as we do the psychology, the study of, the science, because it can be tested. It has been tested. People are in the astrological field and they have seen these things. And you can typecast a person and understand different things about them, but you're also not stuck and prisoner to that birth chart or that, that astrology. It's just a blueprint. What we build and what we create as the structure of who we are it could be something very different. But first you have to understand who you are. I don't know if I stuck to the point. I don't know if that was easy to follow, but I feel like I have said what I wanted to say. Or I've said enough. How much time is this? 20 minutes? I'm going to call it a quits. But if you're interested in this and you find it helpful, you can email me, sabria@gmail.com, leave a comment, or just kind of check out what other videos pop out in this little series that I put out. It's going to be from the framework of more towards what I experience, and from obviously because I can speak best from in this body, in this person. But I will try to explore and understand other signs as I get a better understanding of mine. Another amazing tool is the what's it called? Studying it to human design. Human design. It's amazing because it incorporates the I Ching, the zodiac, like lots of good stuff. I would incorporate that too, and just kind of layer all of these things on top of each other so you can see the overlapping points, where it's not just like, oh, I'm going to be set as I'm someone who studies astrology. You also have to study the psychology. You see how the cause and effect. Everything is like, if I just focused on the right side of my body, I wouldn't function as a human person. We were a full-on entity with so many moving parts. I was reading about the Isaac Newton or whatever, how he studied gravity and discovered gravity. It's because he studied the apple falling from the tree and was also looking up at the moon and saw, well, why doesn't the moon fall? If the apple falls, why doesn't the moon fall? And he had the space to do that. It's so fascinating. He had the space to do that. I think it was in between like around before 1966. I don't know. That he was able to, he had the time to actually even come to this discovery because the world slowed down, starting in 1956, 1666. Between 1665 and 1666, the bubonic plague struck England, and that's the period when Newton retreated to his family farm as a consequence of Cambridge University being shut down. On the farm, he had a year and a half to think and reflect, to ponder the things he learned about Kepler's laws, Galileo's ideas, and other concepts he had studied as an undergraduate at Cambridge. During those years, he burst a remarkable discovery, which was deducing a mathematical description of the universal force of gravity. A plague allowed him to slow down because his university was shut down. He went back home to his family's farm where he had time to reflect and ponder things. A lot like this pandemic, right? We're supposed to go within to understand the truths of self and the reality that we live in. And he discovered something that changed how we understand our universe. If he had just focused on the apple or the outcome of our physical plane, what we can detect with our five senses, the seen realm, we wouldn't know so much about what we know about the earth. He also broadened his view to study the moon and to understand why that doesn't fall the way the apple falls. And now we have our understanding of gravity. All right, I think that's enough. I'll go ahead and end this right here. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.